Tiddy-dum bum bum ba-dee-da dee-da dee-da diddy-dum dee-da-da. Ooh-yoo-doo-doo-doo-yoo. Tiddy-dum bum. All right. Okay. Well, welcome to Tanya today. Rabbi Ronnie Fine coming to you from Chabad Zichron Kadeshim in Montreal, Canada, where it's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. We say hello to Michael, all the way in Germany. Good afternoon. Andrea is with us in Phoenix. John in North Carolina. The daily crew, amazing. TJ in all the way in Melbourne, and in Brisbane next door is Clem. Welcome. We have Miriam all the way in England. Michael in New York City. Welcome. And to us up, June also all the way in Australia. Chaya, shalom from Israel. Oh, beautiful. The Holy Land is with us. Thank you. Peng in the Philippines, welcome. Cindy is in Florida. Natasha in Pakistan. Zeneda in Florida, Liba, and excuse me, Liba and Davida in New York. Mowgli, forget from where, but welcome. Art in Michigan. Joseph is in New Jersey. Mary Lynn in Vancouver. Oh, a fellow Canadian. Yan in Mexico. Okay, beautiful. We have in Clubhouse Vilma, we have Shmuel, we have Austin, we have Malky, Michael, Andrea, Meryl, Benjamin, Deborah. We have Sheer, we have Jay, we have Glenn. And on Instagram, we've got with us Koyan is in Peru, Rachel in North Carolina, in South Carolina, in Delaware we have Maryland, we have Marlene in Miami, Irina is with us. Where are you, Irina? In New York now, or back in California? With Moshe and others joining us. Beautiful. Today is a special day. Today is the 28th of Sivan. This day, 81 years ago, our dear Rebbe came to the shores of America, to New York, from war-torn Europe. War-torn Europe. Yeah. Thank God. Saved from the hands of the Nazis. And came to America. The rest is history. As they say. Right? Okay. So special day. We continue in the 7th chapter, coming to a conclusion in tomorrow's class. The 7th chapter, very lengthy, 10 parts. We're on the journey to understand Yichudei Tata, the lower level of unity. And it's step by step. Lower unity is that there's a reality, and that reality is there's a thing, there is a something, and that something is the divine life force of God that animates it. We're going step by step over here to understand that. Not just to have faith in it, not just to believe it, but understand it. And by understanding it, that makes you more intimately connected to God as creator of the world. Just like in human relations, the more you intimately understand another individual, the more you are connected with them. The more you are bonded and united with them, just naturally. And that's what we're trying to do over here, is to be able to have a more intimate relationship with God as our creator, not as God as the one that we serve, right? That's through Torah mitzvahs. And absolutely, that is, that's something we gotta do. But here it's about him as creator. So we spoke about previously the encompassing light of God, the infinite light, and then how it's now internalized, that light of God. The encompassing light includes everything equally. The internalized light, there's distinction. That's where distinction comes from. Actually, with last night's Torah studies, we went into discussing that tied in very much with what we're learning right now. So to internalize the divine light, to make distinction in creation, that means you need a contraction on the infinite light, as it is encompassing all, right? Encompassing, as we said, not beyond, but from within. As in our mind, we encompass the image of everything equally, the one you love at your table and the flowers that are at the table. When you have that image in your mind, you create that in your mind equally. That's encompassing, but it's incorporated within you. So likewise, we are within God, as he is knowing by his knowing himself, he knows us as we are a part of him. But then there is the light that is, it's contracted and becomes incorporated within each and every creation that makes us a unique creation. That internalized light is what we're going to continue with. How does that happen? How do we understand that? And yet there's an infinity and a finitude that will come together in every created being. And that comes because there is the breath of God's mouth that he utters, and that is enclosed in the utterance that is found in every created being. Right? As we see in Genesis, it says, let there be light. In the words that God said, let there be light, there's two components. Just as in speech, there is two components in us, in our speech. After all, we are created in the image of God. And that component is the breath of speech and the utterance, the utterance of speech. We'll break that down. So, in the breath, just there is in us, in our breath when we speak, right? I'm speaking now, there's a breath that's coming out. It's only verbalized because of breath. But that breath is equal in all of speech. In other words, there's no distinction. Right? So in that breath, if God were to create with the breath of God merely, then it would be diffused without end, without limit, and we'd have infinite beings. Just as, again, the breath in my speech, there's no distinction. And therefore, God would create just from his breath, as it were, as a metaphor, right? Which, of course, is Malchus, right? Royalty, king, as the king rules with his word. So in the word of God. There's the breath of God. And therefore God would create, yes, corporality, but it would be without limit. Right? Now, what is that without limit? In that breath is the kindness of God, the mercy of God, the attributes of God is in that breath. And therefore, that it comes into being, right? Comes into being is through the breath of God, because in the breath of God is the attributes of God, the kindness that motivates, or not motivates, that is in the breath. Right? By us, kindness is a little different. Kindness motivates me to do good. God's kindness is vested in the breath of God. So therefore, that means the kindness of God is infinite because it's bound up and one with God. So that kindness vested in the breath of God means that there is the power of the infinite that is there in God animating, creating, and as the breath brings out from within the individual and verbalizes it outwards. So likewise, the breath of God is what brings out from the nothingness of God to something to create. That there is, again, vested in there, God who builds the world through his kindness. So the two things are there. In the breath, you have the kindness of God that's vested in there. And in Malchus, so you have Chesed as it's in Malchus, vested within it. But the problem then would be is what? You would have infinite worlds. You wouldn't have distinctive worlds that are finite. Again, the breath, as in my breath when I speak, or your breath when you speak, there is no distinction. Where does distinction come in? The breath needs to vest itself in what? Utterance. Well, the utterance is, right, that you're taking now the lips, the teeth, the tongue, the palate, and the larynx, that now what you have is distinctive, right? You have a combination of letters. Letters don't come from the breath. Letters come from the mouth, the teeth, and so on. The utterance, right? Chaksha is going to, which means it's vested now into the combination of letters of the 10 utterances and the combinations of their combinations, substitutions, transpositions of the letters, and numeric values and equivalents of the letters, and so on and so forth, right? Which all of that indicates on a come down, right? Because we have the original words and the 10 utterances. God said let there be light, right? God said let the sun be, be placed in its place, and so on and so forth, right? And all of that then is the way it is in the original 10 statements. But those original 10 statements is not all of creation. Where does all of creation come from? Well, because you have combinations of letters. Something we mentioned in the past. You take the aleph of the word light, and you take the shin from the letter sun. So you have light and sun. Bring them together, makes the word aish, fire. Right? It makes the word fire. Meaning that's a combination of letters from the original letters. But all that shows is a come down, meaning a further contraction on the divine light that is now making a unique created being. The more you come down in the contraction of the divine light, the lesser of the light of God is apparent in the created being. But what is it? It's the very letters on the words of the 10 utterances that are now, that what's enclosed in there? Just like in me, what's enclosed in my utterance when I say, Aleph, It's the breath. What's in that breath? It's the divine attributes. And God, on me, difference with me, it's motivated by a kindness that wanting to share, because that's why you speak. Why do you speak? Because you want to share something with another. You want to communicate with another, share with another. What do you want to share? Well, your kindness, your compassion, right? That's what motivates you to share with another, or any of the attributes. The truth is, any of the 7 emotive attributes or 6 emotive attributes. So it vests itself in the breath of God as His divine attributes, and those divine attributes are what? One with the essence of God. So now we have the power of the essence of God to create something from nothing that vests itself, that is one with the divine kindness, that is expressed in the breath, that the breath and vested in the breath, and that breath is vested in the words that are the Word of God that animates and brings now into what? Into creation, various individual creations, that the light is contracted to such a degree that now you have finite, individual, and independent beings. Powerful understanding, I hope, that everybody got here, of understanding the process and how this works. It's beautiful when you can understand from our own context of what makes us, that we can understand from there the divine order of things. What a blessing God has given us. Most people don't have an intimate connection with God because they just have faith in God, and yes, they'll speak to Him. And it might be, as a child doesn't have an intimacy with a parent. Spouses have an intimacy with each other, right? And where does that intimacy come from? Well, it's the concept of Adam knew Eve, right? Meaning he had relations with her. So by knowing, right? So relations is just a relation. Knowing is a euphemism for relations, right? That's right. He knew her, meaning they had relations. But what we have to understand is that knowing, das, means a deep connection through an awareness of another, of one spouse here, when we're talking about in relations. So here, what we're talking about is God's giving us a capability to know Him, and therefore that is the intimacy. By knowing Him, that gives us an intimacy to Him. As the word intimacy, into me, see. God is giving into me that we could see Him. And therefore He's sharing with us over here, the Alter Rebbe, how we can see God as a creator, and therefore have that bond and that connection by knowing Him. Think about it. That blows the mind. The Alter Rebbe introduced this to us. The Arizal introduced through Tzimtzum that we can have a deeper understanding of Creator within creation. But the Alter Rebbe is giving it to us in such a palatable way that I can understand. That I can understand. He's giving it to us. So let's focus on that. Don't worry about anti-Semitism. Don't worry about other things. Don't worry about the world around you right now. If we get this and live with this, learning to live with this, we have a different existence. Into me, see. You can see the mind's eye right now. It's beautiful that online I see everybody wants to share all other things. But right now, let's just share what we're learning. Let's focus in on that. And, otherwise we're not here. We're elsewhere. And that's not intimate. Intimate, it means to know what you're learning and not focusing on other things. As great and important as they are. Later, you can do that. Right now, look what the Alter Rebbe is giving to us. Davida, shouldn't our speech be verbalized out loud when we daven the Amida? Why is the utterance spoken silently? Because you're standing before God, but you're going to shout before God. When you're standing before Him completely nullified, when you're completely nullified, so you're going to say it in a nullified way. It's if you think He's not hearing you, if you know you're standing before Him, if you're standing before God, you don't have to scream it. Now, sometimes you might have to say it for you to have better concentration. But that's a different thing. John, when Mashiach comes, will there be further adjustments in the switching and exchanging of letters to allow more divine light? No, we're just going to be aware of it. God's not changing the creation, right? So I don't think there'll be any change in that. There'll just be, it says about Adam that God brought all the animals before him and He called them by name. Why? Because when he saw an Ari, a lion, he saw the vibrant life force that it was being animated with by the letters, and therefore he called it by its name based on the letters that are animating it, right? Figurative letters that are animating, that we're talking about over here. And therefore he called the animal by its name, meaning he perceived the godliness that was animating the animals and therefore gave them their name. So likewise, we're going to do the same thing. I mean, they got a name already. He gave them the name then, right? And everything has a name. Everything has a name. Because everything is being animated by God with a word. It's a name. So we will be privy to that. That's what's going to happen, which is amazing. Which is like, wow. Amazing. All right, folks. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Zich and Kadesh in Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. Stay tuned for Rambam, my dear son. All right, folks. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.